Um, very much appreciate everyone being here, especially when you look outside. It looks gorgeous, but that's okay. We're all serious scholars, so we're inside. Um, I want to thank everyone who has sent me emails in the last 15 weeks while I've been the interim EVPRI. I appreciate. I've had some people send some very, very kind emails, and it's much appreciated. It's a new job and a very different one for me, and I'm getting my feet on the ground. So I appreciate everyone's kindness and everyone's grace. We have a full agenda, so that's really all I'm going to say today. I'm going to turn it over to Lee to introduce our research presenters. And then we have some really important other discussions. Please don't sign off because there's some terrific funding opportunities that Will Metcalf's going to talk about, and the new Caillou system that Kevin Merton's going to discuss, and then Lee's going to wrap up telling us about some substantial changes to the NSF and the NIH. So Lee, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, John. So we're going to start off with Dr. Tom Jennings from anthropology. And he's going to share with us his research on violence and mortuary landscapes. And I'm very excited to hear about this. So welcome, and I'll let you take over, Dr. Jennings.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully y'all can see that. I direct the Center for Archaeology and Cultural Heritage in the Department of Anthropology, and we do a lot, including offering curation services for archaeological collections from throughout the region. But we also do a lot of community engaged scholarship and research, and that's what this project is about. It's funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it is very collaborative, including my 4 co-PIs from UofL, Angela Story, Ashley Smallwood, Catherine Markline, and myself. And we also have important community partners, Friends of Eastern Cemetery. So, I forgot to start it. Okay. Eastern Cemetery is local to Louisville. It's located off of Baxter Avenue. I'm going to kind of fly through some of these slides, so don't feel like you have to read everything, but I want to make sure that I'm staying on track for the agenda. But I'm happy to share more if anyone has further interest after this. It's located right next to Cave Hill. Cave Hill has been voted one of the most beautiful cemeteries in all of the United States. Eastern Cemetery has had a more troubled existence. In the 1989 court case came out, there was a whistleblower who came forward and said that the managers of Eastern Cemetery have been criminally overburying the cemetery, reusing graves over and over in a shameful and unethical way. And so that company was shut down. The management of Eastern Cemetery is still kind of up in the air. Volunteers do all of the mowing of the grass. And in the process of the court case, UofL agreed to curate all of the historic documents. So this company was documenting the overburial that was taking place. They were still recording, for the most part, who was buried where. And in a cemetery the size of Eastern, which is about 29 acres, it should hold about 29,000 people, but it's estimated based on the historic records that it holds over 100,000 people actually, and so people were redug and buried up. Some graves indicate maybe used 8 times or more across the cemetery, and this is continuing to affect people today. We receive approximately 300 inquiries a year asking us to search through the records to try and help people locate where their loved ones might have been buried as they're searching for answers. Theoretically, this work falls in the realm of necroviolence, which kind of overlaps with structural violence and racial violence. All of these are playing a role at Eastern Cemetery. Necroviolence, of course, being violence produced through the specific treatment of corpses that is offensive, sacrilegious, inhumane. And the important thing is necroviolence is generative, meaning that it continues to cause further social harm. And today that harm is for the descendants who are living and still having to deal with how their loved ones were treated. This work, as I mentioned, by the cemetery company was intentional and systematic, and they knew what they were doing. And they were reburying and reusing sections. They were redrawing rows to confuse visitors. They were doing things like replanting fast-growing trees. There's even evidence that they were reusing other people's headstones. So it's pretty horrific what they were doing. And this was happening beginning, as far as we can tell, in the early 1900s, all the way through 1989 when the court case happened. It was still actively being reburied. So our work is in part archaeological and then in part ethnographic. And for our archaeological work, we're doing some mapping of two subsections of Eastern Cemetery, Section A, which is at the front near Baxter Road, and then Cave Hill Corner, which overlaps with other previous sections, including one called the Old Slave Ground and African Division. That's in the back corner over there, hidden a little further from access to the front entrance. And so, our working hypothesis was maybe practices were even worse back there, out of the public eye a little more. But to be clear, the entire cemetery was overburied. So we did surface mapping with our students of existing or remaining headstones in both of these subsections of Eastern Cemetery, with the goal of comparing distributions and densities and orientations of headstones, and then ultimately comparing it to the historic records. In these two sections, Cave Hill Corner and Section A, there's no significant difference in death year or when people were buried, which says that any differences that we find in practices at these two sections of Eastern Cemetery do not relate to changes in burial practice through time. In other words, burial and reburial was ongoing at the same time in both of these sections. Some of the historic records do document a category that they called race, although we have strong reason to believe that this was inaccurately collected and recorded. We did compare the existing records between these two sections, and they show that Cave Hill Corner has significantly more individuals of African American heritage buried in that back corner than Section A. Okay, so the results of our archaeological surface mapping. These two areas, we mapped nearly equal areas, 3,496 square meters in Section A, 3,407 in Cave Hill Corner. However, there are important differences in the amount of surviving headstones. Section A has 36% more surviving headstones per 10 square meters. So that suggests that something, either through practices or through deterioration of the back corner of the cemetery, headstones have not survived to the same extent back there. We're also interested in comparing elevational differences. There are clear elevational differences, which we can see. This is a digital elevation map just showing general differences in slope. And the yellow in the back far corner of Cave Hill Corner indicates depression or a bowl. And there is a significant difference in elevation between these two sections, which by itself is not necessarily concerning because cemeteries can have hills. But what is more concerning is when we look at the rate and the nature of these elevational differences, the character of those elevational differences, which this scatter plot is showing a graph of easing along the x-axis and elevation. And what becomes clear is that in Cave Hill Corner, elevation varies significantly, even among headstones that are really closely spaced next to each other. And we can further see these differences by looking at normalized coefficient of variation, which just kind of shows you, how variable elevation differences are in these two different sections. And we found that variation in Section A is about 7%, whereas in Cave Hill Corner, it's 19%. And these box plots kind of help you visualize the range, the differences in the range of the variations in these two sections. So those elevational differences are important because it impedes maintenance of the cemetery in that back corner in terms of just basic mowing the grass back there. It also makes it difficult and more hazardous for families to walk back in that section to find their loved ones. It's not, a smooth landscape to walk on. And we think that depression that's in Cave Hill Corner might be related to sinkhole that has developed under that section, and it might help explain sort of that gap in headstones that we can see where there's less dense headstones in Cave Hill Corner. Perhaps some of them are becoming swallowed up through geomorphic processes related to sinkhole development, which would, of course, not just affect headstones, but also the graves as well. We looked at headstone orientations and found significant differences using circular statistics. In section A, the mean orientation is 60 degrees, which works out to compass east-northeast, whereas orientations in Cave Hill Corner on the right, you can see are much more disorganized. And again, this is further indication of how they were shifting and changing angles of rows, particularly back in Cave Hill Corner, which again will make it harder for individuals to find their loved ones, harder for mowing and maintenance if there are not consistently spaced and aligned rows. But more than that, we know that many of Kentucky's enslaved peoples practiced a mixture of Christianity as well as West African beliefs. And we also know that in burials of enslaved peoples across the United States, eastern United States, they often buried people in the Christian tradition of facing east. And we can see that practice sort of in its, rigidness in cemeteries like Zachary Taylor Cemetery here in Louisville, where every headstone is facing east, and in this case 60 degrees, which matches the mean for section A of Eastern. So what that tells us is this disorganization in Cave Hill Corner not only makes it more difficult for relatives today, but was perhaps depriving people of some of their traditional religious Christian burial practices as well. Further, we're doing some ground penetrating radar work. We've partnered with some of our friends who have a company called Altair, and they've done ground penetrating radar because we're interested to see if we can see evidence of this overburial practices below the ground, and this will help us, again, better fulfill some of those records requests. And we also do get people seeking to disinter loved ones, and so we would like to know whether or not we can say whether those processes would be disturbing perhaps multiple people who have been interred in the same spot. And of course, we're also interested in Section A versus Cave Hill Corner. Can we see differences in burial practices or overburial practices? These results are extremely preliminary, so I just have one slide example to show you. We're still post-processing a lot of this GPR data. On the left, you can see that ringing anomaly that goes from the top, the ground surface, all the way down. That's a copper headstone. So metal shows up really strongly in GPR. But these other anomalies, as you move towards the center, and you can see them where the signals give us waves that are bouncing back at different depths. These are strong indications that we're seeing multiple burials at different depths. And what we need to do now is process all of these GPR transects and trace them out horizontally so that we can see if they do follow, the size and shape of what we would expect for graves under the ground, but then also if we can see evidences of shifting horizontally or at different angles so that we can sort of recreate some of these grave orientations as they changed through time through these unethical burial practices. So very promising results from the GPR, and we are excited to look for that. So from the archaeological standpoint, we've documented that necroviolence is impacting everyone buried at Eastern Cemetery. Those buried in Cave Hill Corner who are predominantly of African-American heritage may have been affected worse by these practices, as evidenced by fewer surviving headstones, more variable elevational landscape, which makes it more difficult for maintenance and for families, deliberately unstructured grave orientations, again, which might have affected Christian burial traditions and some of the religious practices of these peoples who were trying to bury their loved ones. We're not just doing archaeology, we're also doing some ethnographic research led by Dr. Angela Story on the right in this photograph, where we're interested in the impact of this violence on people today. And her students have been interviewing volunteers who are helping to maintain the grounds, as well as family members who have people interred in Eastern Cemetery. She's doing this through participant observations, as well as through directed, structured, and more unstructured interviews, starting with volunteers who are helping to maintain Eastern Cemetery. They tend to have a very positive experience, and they're doing this because they want to do this work, and they're doing this because they feel like they're doing something good for the community, even if they don't have any loved ones buried in Eastern themselves. They view it as a magical place. They become very quickly very connected to Eastern Cemetery just through volunteering every Sunday to help mow the grass or pull some weeds or trim some bushes. The interviews of folks who have loved ones buried at Eastern comes from, we have set up an email hotline for people looking for information, siminfo@louisville.edu. And that's how we were able to connect with some of these people. And so Dr. Story and her students have been interviewing them at various hours. And these interviews are ongoing. But of course, they've had a much tougher time and much tougher experience. One thing that comes through is the fact that the people who were buried at Eastern are some of the poorest in the Louisville community that were being taken advantage of. One example was a white family whose grandmother, when she was younger, had a couple of miscarriages, and then someone from Eastern was in the hospital shortly after she had, lost her babies, and was essentially targeting mothers who had tragedy to get them to bury them at Eastern, and she never found out where her children were buried. And so this was something that stuck with her throughout her life, and something that is sticking with her family ever since as well, still trying to help relocate where these family members are at Eastern. So that was, these are the kinds of stories that are happening at Eastern Cemetery, and we're capturing those and capturing the trauma that families are still facing. Another example was a African-American veteran who was deprived of some VA rights, and so was ultimately buried in Eastern Cemetery when he died. And again, the same thing, not being able to find and relocate these graves, or being buried in a cemetery where there may be multiple people buried in the same grave spot. All of these things have reverberating effects on the living family members who are still trying to remember their loved ones in Eastern Cemetery. Yeah, I'll just keep moving. So for future work, if anyone's interested, we ultimately hope to continue survey mapping headstones at Eastern. We're going to hopefully expand our GPR work to get a better feel for how it varies across the cemetery. There's also a sister cemetery that was managed by the same company, Greenwood Cemetery in the West End, which is a historically African-American cemetery over by 41st Street, that they were doing the same practices at. So that's in our future plans at some point down the road. We want to digitize all the historic records so that families can see the names of their loved ones, and ultimately through GIS, digitize maps and digitize locations so that people can search for and find their loved ones much more easily. And so if you're interested at all in any of this work that we're doing, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you enjoy getting outside, mowing the grass, I could connect you with Friends of Eastern Cemetery, and they would love to have additional volunteers out there to just do the simple thing of helping make Eastern inviting for those who have loved ones buried there. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom. That was disturbing would be the word that I would use, but I appreciate all of the work that you guys are doing. We are a little bit over time, so I want to give everyone a quick moment to see if they would like to ask any questions. But if not, feel free to reach out to him separately or to put a question in the chat and he can get back to you. Anyone real quick? All right. So let's move on to our next speaker. And so this is going to be a discussion around the electron microscopy capabilities at U of L. And Rob Monson and Julia, is it Abersold? I always say it wrong, Julia. I'm sorry.
Abersold.
There you go. They're going to talk about that for a little bit. So you guys are up, Julia.
All righty. Okay. Let me go into here. Okay. How does that look? Does that look okay?
Yep.
Yes.
It looks good.
Oh, okay. All right.
Looks good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about my name is Julia Abersold. I am Director of Operations with the MNTC. I think most people have heard about the MNTC and so forth. Specifically, I'm not going to be talking about everything we offer, but specifically going to be focusing on bio-EM capabilities here at U of L. And this is also in collaborative effort with Rob Monson as well. So the MNTC is actually one of our larger recognized LRC Louisville Research core facilities, where we include our $30 million clean room facility, which is geared towards engineering and semiconductor microfabrication, also imaging and characterization with our scanning electron microscope, which can do materials and biologicals, AFM, and thermal microscopy. But bio-EM is kind of like our latest and newest core, where we are incorporating TEM, SEM, which is the same instrument that also does materials, cryo-EM, and cryo-ET. So with that, the facility or the instrumentation that we actually have on campus, I'm going to start off with the TEM. This is located in the MDR room 526, and TEM is traditionally associated with looking through samples. So like from Dr. Yutan's group, we did mouse heart tissue specifically to look at mitochondria. Again, this is looking at the cross section. It can also be done with cultured cells as well. And with Matt Lorenz's group, we're actually looking at exosomes. In this particular case, you can see these kind of like globular components. They are actually round-like. They look a little bit collapsed in the middle because they're in high vacuum and so forth. But you can kind of see that they're there. Okay, with scanning electron microscopy, this is more associated with looking at the surface of components as opposed to a cross-section. So our Aprio SEM is located on the Shoemaker Research Building and does get a fair amount of use for looking at materials or various components from the engineering school, but we also have a good biological component as well, where you can see Candida albicans, looking at the surface of this, but also cultured cells that were grown directly onto glass slides. And in this particular case, glioblastoma. Now, with any research, we always know that garbage in equals garbage out. So sample prep is uber critical for EM. And there are many techniques of EM, and the way that you prepare your sample is not cookie cutter. So proper EM sample prep before you show up with your sample is critical. Now, I will tell you, we do not typically do sample prep. We do some sample prep training for some aspects of things, but with TEM specifically, we don't do training on that because it deals with a lot of nasty chemicals, heavy metal stains, toxic materials, and so forth, where you have to run in a fume hood, not a BSC. So for cryo-EM, this is another technique that we are bringing on board and so forth. And this is cryo-EM for biological samples. So cryo-EM is performed obviously at cryo temperatures. Now the previous methods that I was talking about before were all done at room temperature, but when you start moving at cryo-EM, you're talking about -180 C around liquid nitrogen temperatures. And you are performing these steps without chemical fixation or dehydration. So the advantages of that is that, number one, the sample is closer to its native state. Okay, it's no fixation, so the membranes aren't moving around. You don't have any collapsing, such as dehydration and so forth. You don't have any heavy metal staining, no need for crystals, but you can also bring on board new or different techniques as well. Single particle analysis for proteins and complex systems. And this is where Rob Monson is my right-hand person in this area. He is critical for this part. And then also cryo-EM for single particles, and then cryo-ET, which is electron tomography for larger components or looking at cells. So with room temperature versus cryo-EM, here's a very specific example. The picture on the left is what I showed previously, looking at exosomes with Matt Lorenz's samples. The picture on the right, now this is not one that I created, but these are exosomes utilizing cryo-TEM. Number one, you're seeing that the components or the exosomes are round. You can see the membranes, and you can also see nesting features within the exosomes as well. For single particle analysis, this is kind of broken down into 3 separate steps. Number one, you have your sample prep, you have your imaging, and then your particle alignment, averaging, and creating your 3D model. And the back end process is where Rob Monson's group really strives, because that's their forte. However, both Rob and myself can assist with this entire process. Single particle analysis is primarily more geared towards developing these complex models for large proteins, RNA, DNA, membrane proteins, drug binding sites, virus structures, in vaccine development, and antibody antigen characterization. With cryo-ET, what we're doing is we're looking at more components that are within the cells. So in this particular case, you can culture cells directly grown onto grids, or again, you can start off with a purified sample. You do plunge freezing. You can then produce a fib lamella if you need to, but if the particle is small enough, which is the area that we're targeting right now, such as like exosomes, you can then put that frozen sample into the cryo-TEM, adjust your grid where it's imaged at various angles, reconstruct, and then you're actually creating this 3D model that you see here on the right. Now, when you're starting off small enough with the plunge freezing and so forth, which is a capability we do have currently right now, then we can start doing this type of imaging. However, if you're going to do like larger samples such as tissue and larger cells and so forth, then we have to start incorporating other sample preparation capabilities we don't have quite yet. So for plunge freezing specifically, which can be used for cryo-EM and also cryo-ET, we have invested in a collaborative relationship between the MNTC and Rob Monson's molecular modeling core with the BCC, where we're doing grid prep, number one, to make the grids hydrophobic, followed by plunge freezing. That we then have to clip those grids, meaning putting rings on the top and the bottom so that they can be correctly held within these Thermo Fisher cryo-TEMs, and then shipped to a cryo-EM ET facility. Now, the question is, why would you be shipping to another facility that has these instruments? Well, a typical cryo-TEM starts anywhere from $6 to $10 million, of which we don't have one right now for obvious reasons. However, we have many friends that surround us that do have one, but there's also some national networks that offer free beam time as well, which I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. So again, the process of doing like single particle analysis is broken up into 3 steps. You have your sample prep, you have your imaging of that purified sample, followed by the analysis. And this is where the Rob Monson's group comes into play. They have a dedicated server that has a lot of horsepower, along with the necessary software needed to create these 3D models, and also can provide assistance with final model building. And I would draw your attention to the electron microscopy data bank. This is where a lot of these types of results are posted, to where you can look at all different kinds of 3D structures, from viruses to RNA to cells and so forth. So it's just drawing attention to this data bank from here. So, and I'm getting towards the end of my talk here. As I mentioned before, there are the barrier to do cryo-EM and cryo-ET can be kind of high because of the physical cost of the tooling, or excuse me, of the instruments, personnel, training, service contracts, and so forth. So the NIH has developed 2 networks where they have set up these really nice MacDaddy facilities, and beam time at those facilities is free. Okay, they also provide training for sample prep and also how to do the analysis. However, with it being free, it's also competitive, meaning you have to submit a proposal. However, with Kentucky being an IDEA state, we have been told we will probably get preferential treatment because they want to expand this capability of everybody being able to do cryo imaging. So this is my last slide. We are in collaboration with the Kentucky Embray and so forth. We are hosting a Fiji/Image Day analysis workshop with some AI thrown in for good measure as well. So if you yourself want to become proficient, or if you want your research students to become proficient with ImageJ, or just get better at it, or have a more rounded idea of what it can do, then this workshop is good for you, might be very good for you. It is in person, but it's also virtual in Zoom, virtual by Zoom. It's going to be on Tuesday, June 4th. It is going to be an all-day working workshop from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. If you're there in person, lunch will be served. And of course, virtually, that's optional to you. However, we do require registration because we want a head count for who's interested in the workshop, but also we need to know how many people want to show up for lunch. This is going to be taught by David Alston, who is also part of the Kentucky Embray. And I think that is it. If you wish to perform any of these EM techniques or other ones, because there are lots and lots of EM techniques I haven't even talked about, then please reach out to us. All right. That's all I had, and I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
Thanks, Julia.
Rob, did you want to throw any words for extra measure?
I think that you did a great job on the overview and explanation of everything. Yeah, I'd just say that yeah, I mean we're fully capable of processing cryo-EM single particle data sets. We're set up, ready to go. Just reach out and see about getting your samples plunge frozen.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
This is
Kevin,
Kevin
it
Walsh.
looks like
Yeah.
you do.
Well, it's more of a comment than a question. So I'm Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies down at the engineering campus. I'll just say that this is a great, I think, example of a collaboration between the Health Science Campus and Belknap campus. And so I just think it's great. We need to continue doing more of this, and I think it's where both campuses get to know one another and see what's available at the different campuses, and I commend this activity. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kevin. All right, so it looks like Will Metcalf, you're up next. Going to talk a little bit about the ARPA-H Innovation Network.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So, hey, everybody. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about what we are doing with ARPA-H. As you all know, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPA-H, is a new funding agency that is running some interesting programs, and we are monitoring those really closely to stay connected. I also want to reiterate what Kevin Walsh just said and thank all the presenters today. It's fantastic. I mean, it shows the breadth of and diversity of research happening across campus, and then interdisciplinary collaborative work from engineering to medicine and then anthropology. It's really impressive. So I'm just going to share a few slides about what we're doing with ARPA-H and where we are. So here we go. Can you guys see that, Lee?
Yes, I can see it.
All right. So as I mentioned, ARPA-H is a fairly new funding agency that supports advanced research in health across really kind of 4 focus areas. So health sciences futures are expanding what's technically possible, reaching everyone quickly, or scalable solutions, proactive health, keeping people healthy, preventative healthcare, and resilient systems, which is building integrated health systems, healthcare systems. And so that's kind of the focus and what the funding opportunities we're seeing coming out of ARPA-H are. There's two that we're really intently focusing on. One is this Investor Catalyst Hub that was recently announced, and we're putting in an application to become a spoke for this Investor Catalyst Hub, which will give us access to scale health research and have access to venture investment ecosystem that we can deploy and hopefully scale health interventions that come out of U of L at a quicker pace. And so having access to this ARPA-H hub through a spoke model will give us access to funding that otherwise we wouldn't be eligible for. Gives us speed, different contracting vehicles that we can pursue with being a spoke, access to networking opportunities that otherwise we wouldn't have, influence the types of calls that come out of ARPA-H, and then information through this open library of resources that's available through the ARPA-H hub. So we are actively pursuing a spoke model now. Jessica, Sharon, and I are looking at it and putting in hopefully what's a competitive proposal to become a spoke. The other opportunity that we're monitoring and tracking is this HEROES program, which is focused on changing the way that healthcare prevention is done. This is a big funding opportunity, which is a different model, which is focused on regions that are traditionally underserved and hit by preventable health diseases and health burdens. And they want to realign the incentive models and the financing models through this. So it's a partnership with a health accelerator, what they call outcome buyers, and interventions that leverage new technology to reach groups at a population level that haven't been reached before. So it's a population health intervention model that realigns incentives and pays for outcomes as opposed to specific services. The four health areas of intervention that they're looking to target first are maternal health outcomes, heart attack and stroke, cardiovascular disease, opioid overdose or opioid use disorder, and then alcohol-related abuse and harms. So these are the kind of the four areas that they're looking at with this HEROES program. Again, this is a really massive call where you have to build a coalition. We have a call with the program officer on May 1st to discuss how U of L could get involved in this. It's a collaborative effort, which will require us to partner with, again, health accelerators and outcome buyers, which could be the state or it could be an insurance company, and then providers as well. So we're looking at how U of L and the health system can get plugged into this new opportunity and how we stay connected to what's going on with ARPA-H in general. So just wanted to share that with the community, what we're doing in that space, and that we're staying connected to the ARPA-H funding opportunities, and more to come soon on that. So there, I'll stop. Kevin, I see you still have your hand raised. I don't know if you have a question about this or if that's just you didn't take it down.
Sorry, didn't take it down.
All right, so I'll stop there and
So Will,
yeah.
The HEROES project, it seems to me that anyone on campus who has an interest in value-based care, value-based reimbursement should be aware of that, and also analysis of healthcare claims and things like that spreads out. Who else should be interested in the HEROES project?
Yeah, I think anybody who has an interest in those four outcomes areas, so maternal health researchers who have evidence-based methods to prevent, to improve outcomes for women postpartum would be a group that should pay attention. The key here is that you have to have an outcome buyer partner. So if we have evidence-based interventions that we know will work at a population level, then that's something we can get plugged in. People who are in cardiovascular research, again, this doesn't have to be anything that's cutting edge from a research perspective. It's something that's proven to work. And there's a population-based intervention. So I would think public health would be a good group to get involved in this. And then opioid abuse or use disorder interventions to prevent opioid overdose is a focus, and then alcohol use disorders as well. Again, not focusing on cutting edge research or development of new technology, but deployment of technologies that will access population for interventions that traditionally have been underserved. So that could be things like, how do you get people to trust the interventions, and come to the physician and take a statin if they need that for, cardiovascular disease, and those interventions. And then we have to show the positive outcome over a period of years in order to get the reimbursement for the intervention. And it's a really interesting program. It's complicated, and so that's what the call on Monday is about: is to really understand how do we get plugged in as a university in a way that can benefit us and the community that we serve. Kentucky is really the target population for this type of program, which we have higher incidences of these types of negative outcomes for all of the 4 areas. So I think we're really ideally situated to play a part in this program. It's a fairly quick turnaround. They announced the call last week. We've been monitoring it. It's due in June, but I think we've got time to get plugged into potentially either develop something collaboratively with some players in the city or others around the country they have this partnering hub opportunity that we can get plugged into as well. But again, got a call next week with the program officer to really understand exactly where UofL can get plugged in.
Last comment is looking forward. I know Dr. Cardarelli, the new dean of public health, has an interest in nutrition and in particularly fetal maternal outcomes. I see Paul McKinney, who's returned to his role as vice dean in that school. Certainly, this is a natural sort of thing for proven interventions to be deployed, but whoever's interested in that is going to have to work with Will and his group as well. I think we probably ought to move on to Cayuse, and I think that's going to be Kevin Merton is going to give us an update on Cayuse. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Will. Can you see my slides, John? Yep. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Lee, for the opportunity to be here today to provide an update on this Cayuse project that we've been working on for the last couple of years. We're making some strong progress.
Hey, Kevin, we're just seeing John's face now. So.
Oh, well, that's a problem. Hi, John. Let's try again.
There you go.
There we go. All right, so Cayuse is UofL's newest addition to our electronic research administration suite. Hopefully you all are aware at this point, ERA systems are IT tools that are used to electronically administer your research programs. They come in a variety of shapes and forms with a variety of functionality, and we're trying to employ a lot of that functionality here at UofL. So for the last 10, 12 years, we've used the IRIS system. And then in 2022, we put a large advisory group across campus together. And that group elected to transition some of the functionality that we were using in the IRIS system over to the Cayuse system. So we've been in the process over the last couple of years of implementing some additional functionality into the Cayuse system, including development of federal grant proposals, administration of your projects and awards within Cayuse. And we're also moving the animal care and use and biosafety applications into this new system. Additionally, we've been working diligently to bring up some newer tools to support the research community. So in the last 18 months, we brought up this pivot system, which you can access to find all forms of funding opportunities. We brought up the InfoReady system, which is used for internal grants programs and limited submission opportunities. And then our most recent addition, hopefully you've heard of, called Dimensions. It's really a competitive intelligence tool where you can evaluate the landscape of research here at UofL, everything from grants and publications to patents and clinical trials. And all of our systems and tools, if you should check out this website, Got a good, strong summary of all the capabilities that we've put into place. All right, as far as implementation of the Caillou system, again, I referenced those 4 applications that we're working to move into Caillou's. The first one is called Proposals S2S. This is used to develop federal grant applications and to submit those to grants.gov using system-to-system functionality. We rolled this out at the beginning of the calendar year. So it is live and available today. To date, I think we've submitted somewhere around 35 federal applications to NIH, NSF, DoD using the system. So it's been incredibly well received. Haven't had many problems at all with it. If you're developing an upcoming application, federal application, strongly encourage you to utilize that system. The main application that we're working on today is the sponsored projects application. This will be used for the internal administration of grant and contract proposals, awards, subawards, everything related to sponsored programs. We are under implementation currently and targeting eyeballing go live for the system in early fall of 2024, should the next several months go well. And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about that one on the next slide. We're also working on the IACUC and IBC applications, which will move from IRIS to Caillou's. Those are still under development, having some challenges on the company side with those. So the implementation timeline is still TBD on those. There are 2 applications which will remain in IRIS. So your COI disclosures, excuse me, and your human subjects protocols, those applications are going to remain in IRIS for the time being. We do anticipate that those will move to Caillou's in the near future. So in the last week, we've jumped into this final implementation phase for the Caillou sponsored projects application. This is going to fully replace the IRIS system and any legacy forms that people are still using. We still see people using the proposal clearance form from, 2008. The Caillou's SP application is going to fully replace those, and the entire campus will be using that application once we have it up and running. This final implementation phase that we've stepped into, we're engaging across campus. Hopefully you all have seen the communications. It's going to last 3 to 4 months. And really, there are several goals. We're trying to engage with campus, get people exposed to the system, and get some final feedback before we go live to make any final tweaks that are necessary. There are a few final development steps that we need to take. So we're leaning on a set of unit administrators that will help us with those final steps. And then really we want to give our colleges and schools and teams across campus the opportunity to understand how the system is going to impact their internal business processes. Give them an opportunity to change those processes if necessary, or to realign resources as necessary. And then, should you not be able to engage in this, next 3 or 4 month process, rest assured that we will do additional training once we're ready to go live. So that's really all I have today. Happy to answer any questions. There's a lot more detail at this website. Just Google Caillou's UofL sponsored projects, and you can get engaged in this implementation process.
Any questions for Kevin? All right. Thank you, Kevin. So it looks like I'm last. And what I would like to talk about, just for the remaining minutes that we've got here, is to just give you an overview of 2 different things that are coming out. NSF has released a new, what's called PAPG. So that's Proposal and Award Policy and Procedures Guide. And part of the changes that will be coming out, that will be effective May 20th, is that there's modifications to biosketches. They're moving to using what's called a common form. Our recommendation is that you, if you're already got a biosketch in Science CV. You may go on and use that because that will comply. They are also revising to remove the 3-page limitation for the bios, and that there's no page limit for the section of the proposal. Synergistic activities is being removed, and so there's quite a few little changes and nuances related to bio sketches. A few changes as well as far as some updated guidance for current and pending support. And then there's a couple of more regulatory type of changes. There's going to be some updated guidance around, clarifying, the information around foreign organizations or individuals that you're working with. And then there's also going to be a new restriction establishing that individuals who are party to a malign foreign talent requirement program will have to have some additional vetting through Allison Ratterman's office. And then there will be a few different changes to reporting requirements. What we plan to do with both the changes that are relevant for NSF effective May 20th, as well as the NIH changes that I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes, is we will do some communications out to everyone, and we will do that through our standard ORI listserv. And I will add that link into the chat. So if you're not registered for that listserv, please make sure that you are, because the communications regarding these sponsored changes and any impact they have for, OSPA and processing proposals for submission will be included via that route. As far as the changes for NIH, they're significant, and they're effective January 25th of 25. They are now going to have a simplified review framework for most research projects. It's primarily the R series as well as the U's. And they are taking the 5 regulatory criteria that exists now, which is significance, investigators, innovation, approach, and environment. And they're reorganizing them into 3 factors. 2 will receive numerical criterion scores, and 1 will be evaluated for sufficiency. The 3 factors will be considered in arriving at the overall impact score, but the basic reframing will basically ask reviewers to evaluate how important is the proposed research, how rigorous and feasible are the methods, and whether the investigators and institution have the expertise and resources. The Research Development Office will be creating a table that will talk about, how you used to lay out in the outline for preparing your proposals, and then how the new ones will, map out. So we will provide that in the communication that will come out. There was a recent webinar about the changes that I missed, and the PowerPoint is listed on the website, and they indicated that the video and transcript would be posted soon. So again, when we do the communication out, we will provide that link as well. There's also revisions to the NIH and the Agency Healthcare Research and Quality fellowship proposals. And so these are going to be applicable for the F30, the 31, 32, 33, and the F99 and K00. And so they're including revisions to the criteria used to evaluate the applications, and they're making changes to the fellowship supplemental form. So again, stay tuned for some additional information about that as well. We also are seeing changes from NIH around reference letter. They're providing some different instructions on what that structure of that letter should look like if you're submitting a proposal that requires a reference letter. And then there's significant changes to the training grant applications. So those are going to be for the Ts and K-12s. And there is an upcoming webinar on June 5th to discuss those changes. So there's not a whole lot of information available through NIH yet. But what they have provided is that there will be changes and updates to tables, training in the responsible conduct of research, and a recruitment plan to enhance diversity. And they will be defining expectations for mentoring trainings. And then for both NSF and NIH, there will be using now application forms for Forms I in grants.gov and Assist. So keep an eye out for that. And if there's any research administrators that you work with that are not on this call, you may want to give them a heads up as well. And then again, for NIH, there are changes to make the biosketch and current and pending and support to match the common forms that the feds have now required. Let's see, is there anything else? I think I hit the major things. I think from a researcher standpoint, the changes are going to be the review criteria. And so, you know, as we work on coming up with some guidelines and some tables for you guys, we will disseminate that. And then, of course, if anybody has questions as they're preparing proposals, you know, feel free to reach out to our office, the Research Development Office, and we'll be happy to guide you the best we can based on, you know, that we're all just starting on these. I think that's it, John.
Well, thanks a lot. I guess I'll close. I wish everybody a happy DNA Day. It was on this day in 1953 that the first description of the structure of DNA was published in Nature. Sadly, they left off an essential contributor in Rosalind Franklin, but since the last 10 years, this is known as DNA Day, and so everybody feel free to celebrate. That's it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.